On Godi media, supine, constructively critical, or pointlessly combative. We invite on stage Shehzad Poonawala, BJP national spokesperson, and contributing moderator Abhijit Iyer Mitra, senior fellow, Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies.
Just a note of caution that I had actually told Ajit very clearly that he's on my boycotted list. Here I am.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about the most important subject in India today, Godi media. Of course, nobody actually knows what the Godi media is, because one person's Godi is another person's courage, you see. Like they say, one man's lap is another man's lion. So we're going to start. Let me start. I'm meant to be a contributing moderator. I don't know what a contributing moderator does. So I'm just going to be moderating, and I'll let our friend Shehzad here do all the contributing. Let's just lay down the first principle, Shehzad. Define supine, constructively critical, or pointlessly combative.
I think all of these characters, the first one, you never find in Ravish. The second one, you don't find in Ravish. And the third one, you find a lot in Ravish. So, I think, look, why is this Godi media term coming along? You know, for a very long time, there was a rejection of a media that served as nothing more than a special purpose vehicle of the first family. And that media was rejected and ejected by the viewers, and their political preference was rejected and ejected by the people of this country. Those people, instead of functioning as the watchdog of a democracy, often ended up becoming the lapdog. And those people have now converted this terminology of lapdog as a target to discredit other sections of the media whom they do not agree with, because that section of the media doesn't appease or doesn't, in a sense, praise or eulogize the first family. And therefore, it is actually inherently their own shortcomings that they're trying to reflect on others. And this, you know, if you see this pattern, it's a pattern that doesn't end. You know, Godi media is a funny term. We are having a discussion on it. But actually, it is a deeper mindset. Ever since 2014 has seen a political shift, and it's not just a political shift, it's actually a larger socio-cultural shift. Look at what the entire non-right or the entire Congress ecosystem is doing. They have started off by delegitimizing the entire institutional process of democracy. They say election commission is bad, election commission is Godi. They say Supreme Court is Godi. They've gone to the extent of now dehumanizing the voters. You've seen Randeep Surjewala say Janta Rakshas hai. You now hear them saying that Hindus should be terminated or Sanatan should be exterminated. And the third part of this, the delegitimization, the dehumanization, and the discrediting. And by the way, all those people who stand up in parliament and make speeches about the 7 signs of fascism, in fact, the most prominent signs of fascism or authoritarianism is that you discredit the media, you delegitimize institutions, and you dehumanize the target that you want to actually create an atmosphere against to rile up your own support base. So I think these are we may reject this as just Godi media, but actually the tendencies are very fascist in nature. And therefore, even the list that they came out with. Ironically, this so-called boycott list, and I'm sure everyone has seen that list of 14 journalists. At least 2 of those journalists don't even do debate shows. Sudhir Chaudhary and Sushant Sinha, I think a couple of more, don't do debate shows. So there's no question of inviting anybody there, the BJP or the Congress. Yet they have put a name of those journalists in that list. Therefore, I don't call it a boycott list. I call it as a fatwa. It's a hit list. And it's a hit list which basically is encouraging whatever few Congress karyakartas or the Congress supporters that are left, is that if you see these 14 people, any of these 14 people, pick up your, whatever you can and attack them. You can attack them on social media. Some crackpot might go and attack them physically. So I think it is much more than just a boycott list and Godi media. It is actually a fascist approach, and this is a hit list.
But I think there is an important counterpoint that the predominant family, or whatever you want to call it, the first family, is no longer in a position of predominance. They're kind of pretty much irrelevant. They hardly have any seats in parliament. Why should the media spend their time attacking them instead of the government, which should be held to account, shouldn't it? I mean, it is very legitimate if the government fails at something, or doesn't have to fail, is just not 100%. Surely criticizing the government should be the prime duty of the press, not going after the opposition, right?
Well, first of all, I don't think it is the prime duty of the press to be critical of something just because they have to look or seem to be anti-establishment. The job of the free press should be to stand with what is right, not what is seen to be or perceived to be right in certain ecosystems. So they are not appeasing anybody. They need to stand up for whatever they believe is right. For instance, the people who masquerade as the torchbearers of independent journalism, even the worst critics of this government will find something that they will agree with on the G20. I mean, we, for God's sake, got the Americans and the Russians both to say that the G20 New Delhi Declaration was a document that we can all be proud of. Now, I ask you, all of these torchbearers who think that they are the voice of the free media, the YouTubers and all of them, which I call the Supari media, please try and see if they have done even one statement, one tweet, one video, and some people have done 4-part videos on G20, 4 parts. All they focused on is that pani bhar gaya tha. They focused on सोने और चांदी की थाली में खाना परोसा गया, आपने गरीबी छुपा दी. All of these are factually inaccurate stories, by the way. They've all been contradicted with facts. Nobody was served in a golden plate. 4,100 crores was not spent on the G20. We know for a fact that the water did accumulate, but it was removed within a matter of hours. And it is bound to happen when it rains so much in any part. It doesn't mean the infrastructure is useless. It's not what happened during the Commonwealth Games. Yet, this entire lot of people did not find one single part to focus on and say, look, this is a great achievement. The economic corridor, or for instance, the biofuel alliance, or for instance, the consensus that we've hammered out with all sides, the fact that the African Union was included, not one single part they found worthy of saying that, look, this was an achievement. And therefore, I think that the point is that it's not about being critical or not critical. You can be critical. Forget journalists. Even people like Anand Ranganathan are very critical of the government. You had an entire session yesterday dedicated to that. So I am saying the difference between this side and that side is that this side is not a bonded labor of one party or one government. It stands up and speaks its mind freely, and nobody chastises or penalizes. Nobody's penalizing Anand Ranganathan for speaking his mind. We counter it with facts, and he has a point, we have a point, we agree to disagree. But on the other side, unless there is full and complete acceptance of their narrative, you are otherwise castigated as Godi media. If you do not agree with every point of theirs. For instance, Shwapan Das Gupta is sitting here. I mean, he can tell you better that if Shwapan Das Gupta expresses a view which is contrary to the view that their power center holds, immediately Shwapan Das Gupta is called all kinds of adjectives. And that is their intolerance. It is actually their authoritarianism, and it is their fascist tendencies that they do that.
But Shehzad, to be fair, during
and by the way, you said that the Gandhi family is out of power. You know, everyone's seen that. I mean, it's a little bit of a cliche, but that dialogue is very relevant in Vivek Agnihotre's film. Ki sarkar to hamari hai.
But then that begs the question.
Sarkar hamari hai, but
system unka hai.
system
the
the system has its own character.
But then that begs the question, what exactly is this government doing? Because if you can't come back to a narrative, I mean, if you can't push back on the narrative of a Godi media, for example, I remember a very dear friend of yours once, known for journalism of courage, was interviewing the First Lady at the time. And all he could ask her was, what do you cook at home? Do you make pasta at home? And then he interviewed the prime princess, the crown princess. And her answer was she makes
You
Thai
said
green
crown?
curry. Yes, crown.
Your R's and your
And her
L's.
answer was she makes Thai green curry. And these were examples of journalism of courage. On the other hand, to be fair to them, during the UPA, a lot of these people were at the forefront of questioning a lot of the corruption that happened under the UPA. So they did actually question the previous government.
Well, first of all, it is not our job to tell journalists what to do. The journalists can decide for themselves. If they get an opportunity with Sonia Gandhi and all that they can think of is how Indira Gandhi cooked food or she is cooking pasta, then that reflects on their journalism. But having said that, did they actually question the government or did they actually play a role in only perpetrating a narrative where the first family was protected all the time? I don't remember Rajdeep Sardesai or all of these people. Did they ever question Sonia Gandhi because she was de facto running the government? Did they ever question her on all the corruption that took place? Are you saying that it was Sonia Gandhi did not know of the corruption that was taking place? Was she not the political head that should have been held accountable? They, of course, took on targets like Manmohan Singh and they took on targets like ministers in the government. But did they ever question the real power center of that government? I don't think so. And therefore, today too, the question that we are saying is that look at the approach. The Congress party has governments in some states. If anybody asks a question, they are immediately hounded. Look at what they are doing to Sudhir Chaudhary in Karnataka. This is the same bunch of people who stand up for journalists who have even had courts upholding severe charges against them. But here you have Sudhir Chaudhary who's being hounded with a case. You go to Bengal, you have a very recent case where somebody exposed the Hooch tragedy. He has been hounded. In Chhattisgarh, there is a journalist called Kamal Shukla. He speaks about electricity and he puts a Facebook post. He's hounded with a sedition case. And on the other hand, you remove a list of journalists you will boycott because they ask you difficult questions. So it is actually their approach that the media should function in a certain way. We are nobody to tell Rajdeep what he should do. It is up to him. If he wants to ask a certain question of Sonia Gandhi, that's up to him. I think the audiences have rejected this kind of journalism, to say the least. So I think that the difference is that on the one hand, they are trying to control the media narrative, the editorials, which they feel they can continue to do so. On the other hand, it is not about our job to control the narrative. We control our governance. And people look at that and people then call out the journalists who go against a certain thing that is obvious.
Right. Now, since we're talking about this boycott list that the INDI Alliance has come up with, tell me, how is that any different from, say, Modi, just before the elections, only giving interviews to some journalists and not to a whole bunch of other journalists? Effectively, it's pretty much the same principle. One might call it a boycott list, one might not call it a boycott list. But when you choose who to give it to and who not to give it to, it adds up to be the same thing.
How many media organizations are there in this country roughly? Take a wild guess. Maybe more. So how can a human being give, then by that logic, Modi should have given just like about 900 interviews to every media organization. Then on what scale do you say that, look, I'm going to give it to these, but not to those? So look, I think those decisions were not taken on the basis of preferences, but purely on the basis of where all will that interview or that engagement have an impact and reach the maximum number of people. So that's a purely a logistical calculation that is made that, look, I want to reach people in the north, so I will pick one organization that is prominent in the north. publication in Bengal that is prominent, a publication in Gujarat that is prominent, publication in South that is prominent, and I will reach the audiences, because obviously I can't do 500 or 1,000 interviews. So a preference is one thing. Boycotting people who are not even inviting you on their show and putting out a hit list and then saying that these are the people who are against the country and you need to boycott them. I mean, what kind of, the only other place that I hear of such kind of juvenile and immature but dangerous behavior is when you excommunicate people from a particular community, or you have a culture where you say that, oh, because he worships so and so God, you are now a kafir. So what are the repercussions of declaring a person a kafir? It comes from that same thought process that either you follow my diktat, my fatwa, or else is open to imagination.
But to not give an interview to a single critical journalist, because let's face it, all those interviews that we've seen so far that Modi has given, they've always been, sir, is the sky blue, is the grass green, does the sun rise in the east, does it set in the west? Have you ever seen a particularly combative interview?
You have a good friend called Smita Prakash from the ANI, and I think she has done a number of interviews. What do you think of her interviews?
She doesn't take him on.
Then you should have a conversation with Smita.
I have.
What did she tell you?
That's privileged. That's between me and her.
Look, I think there is a difference between interviewing a political personality and interviewing somebody who's on the office of the Prime Minister or on a constitutional position. So you don't go around saying, Pradhan Mantri, jawab do. You can't do that. That kind of journalism is not acceptable by any standards. So if somebody is comparing it that, I can show you a large number of interviews that were conducted with Dr. Manmohan Singh, and they were all done in a dignified manner. If you are mistaking a dignified interview for a soft interview, and I don't think Smita does any soft interviews, she has perhaps asked, and she has the onerous task as a head of an agency that distributes news content to so many news channels, that she has to ask every shade of question so that every channel from the north to the south finds it relevant. So I think she grabs and puts all the questions in a dignified way. The problem is that what the Gandhi family or the Congress party expects is that journalists should hold Prime Minister by his collar and start asking him questions, which nobody is going to do. They didn't do it during Indira Gandhi's time. They didn't do it during Manmohan Singh's time. They didn't do it during Rajiv Gandhi's time. They're not going to do it during Modi's time. And they're not going to do it for Modi, Yogi, Hemanta, Amit. They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it.
So I completely get that there is a certain decorum required when you're interviewing the Prime Minister. At the same time, what is that line between decorum and asking an extremely uncomfortable, inconvenient question? Let me give you an example. Going to Sonia Gandhi, for example, and asking her, did your husband take money in Bofors? Okay. Is that rude or is that polite? And how would it be different from going to, say, Modi and saying, yo, bro, how much did Adani give you?
Okay. Asking Sonia Gandhi, how much money did your husband take in Bofors, is an impolite question. Asking Sonia Gandhi that how much money did Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi get in Bofors is a very relevant question.
How?
It is
there's
because
no category here between.
Because I'll tell you why. Because it was not Sonia Gandhi's husband who was taking the money. It was the Prime Minister of India who was accused of being involved in bribery and corruption in a scam that related to national security. Therefore, it is absolutely relevant to ask Sonia Gandhi that Sonia Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, who happened to be your husband, was accused by a minister of your own government, Mr. VP Singh, of indulging in corruption, and therefore you are in the position to answer that question, that isn't there a taint of corruption on your family? And it is Mr. Rajiv Gandhi himself who acknowledged in the public domain that every time he sent 1 rupee to the people of India, 85 paise was stolen by a Lutera Panja. So it is his public acknowledgement. On the other hand, when there is the same question, it is entirely legitimate. And these questions are asked on a daily basis about the group that you referred to, the Adani group. There is a Supreme Court report that has come out, which has people like Nandan Nilekani, which has people like K.V. Kamath, which has people like the retired Justice of the Supreme Court and many others, who came to a conclusion that the report given by the SEBI was absolutely indicative that there was no regulatory failure in that. The Supreme Court continues to take cognizance of the proceedings in this matter. The ED has now come up with a separate report as to how some people benefited from overseas by short selling on Adani while this entire conspiracy was hatched. It is in the public domain that the latest hit job done on that group was funded by Soros. It is out in the public domain that the person who authored that report is a third grade pseudo who gets money or who was writing for an organization which got money from the Chinese, which is NewsClick. All his articles on the Rafales were discredited by the Supreme Court. And therefore, when you still make that accusation, you're entitled and you'll get an answer that the Supreme Court has come out with a verdict. Or at least it has come out with a finding. So you need to accept that. And who asked for the Supreme Court order on this? It wasn't the BJP. It was a Congress leader, and not many would know that. The Congress leader, Jaya Thakur, approached the Supreme Court. And she said that there must be an investigation into this matter. The investigation started. Mr. Khadge is on record on 2nd of February to say that either a JPC or a Supreme Court probe, whichever one, but one of these two, the Supreme Court probe was initiated. Derek O'Brien is on record to say no JPC. Each state must do an investigation wherever they have given a project. Why doesn't Mr. Khadge follow that? Why doesn't the Congress party do investigations in Rajasthan, Chhattisgarh? Why doesn't Aam Aadmi party do one in Punjab? Why doesn't Mamta Didi do one in Bengal? So you see, the point is that one place, there is a stench, more than a stench of allegation. There has been a history of corruption by one family. They are facing legal trouble in the National Herald's case. They have not been given relief, even though they approached the highest court for discharge. On the other hand, you have the Supreme Court saying that prima facie the first report is indicating that there is nothing wrong or nothing amiss. So therefore, the question is not the problem. The context with which it's being asked is the problem.
So that again keeps bringing me back to the question, because you're suggesting that if there is no proof of guilt, then it's not a good question. But the thing here is, why does nobody ever ask the Prime Minister that question? Why is it a disallowed question? During his press conferences, like we know for a fact, there are questions you will never be allowed to ask Sonia Gandhi or Rahul Gandhi. Tell me one journalist who has had the courage to go up to them and ask them about National Herald to their face.
Then for that, my dear friend Abhijit, if that is the supposition, then you ought to have some of the journalists who have interviewed Prime Minister, and they need to answer that has it been disallowed? Have they chosen not to ask it? Or have they asked it in a manner that encapsulates the larger allegations of, and there have been many allegations that the opposition have made on corruption, which have not stuck because there is no proof or substance in it. For instance, the Dwarka Expressway. It was a completely fictionalized account. They picked up one thing, one small para from the CAG report. Without reading the complete context, they went to town about it. And it turns out that the fact is that that expressway is being actually created at 12% lower than the tendered price. And it is one of the most futuristic pieces of infrastructure that we've built. So now they have gone silent on it. Now some journalists will ask that, sir, there are many allegations of corruption. And he may ask that bunch of questions that have been posed by the opposition. And the answer to that is that none of them stick. Because the fact of the matter is that this government has a zero tolerance towards corruption. And therefore, they may make allegations, but none of them stick. And that is also something that the journalist will bear in mind when he's putting that question.
Fair point.
But that is for the journalist to answer. And I don't think that anybody has, there's no instance, so many people have interviewed the Prime Minister. Where is the one instance where a journalist has come out and said, no, I was disallowed to ask a question. Let's have that journalist and come here and give him a platform and ask why.
Fair point. Which then brings me to the next question, since you are the spokesperson of the BJP. Why are you chaps always behind on the narrative? Why is it always the opposition setting the narrative and you're constantly responding?
Well, I think that's a question that many of you perceive or feel. And it's a legitimate feeling to have. Sometimes when you are in government and when you are the party in power, there are certain amounts of things that you have to take in cognizance, because what you say or what you articulate doesn't just benefit you politically, but it may have an impact beyond your political party. It may have an impact on the country. It may have an impact on international relations. The BJP could have utilized, as you're saying, many an opportunity to score many political goals which would have benefited us politically. But the BJP considers not putting Dal Hit above Desh. And therefore, many an opportunity, and I concede to that, many an opportunity where we could have gone for the jugular, made the narrative, etc., we let go because there is a larger job of running the country and ensuring that there is social cohesion. And at the cost of that, sometimes you don't go for the kill, as it were, in setting the narrative. You look at what is more important, that is to run the country, and therefore. But having said that, in the last 15 or 20 days, for instance, we've had the G20. The opposition, if you think that setting the narrative is saying that the G20 was a complete failure, Inka G20 tha, as Priyanka Vadra said, if you think that is good narrative setting, or saying Sanatan should be exterminated or Hindu Dharma is a menace to the world, if you think that setting of the narrative is good narrative setting, and then we respond to it belatedly and we respond to it in hard kind, I think we're happy to respond to such kinds of narrative setting of the opposition.
I mean, that's a different issue I'll come to. But I think the question really is, by not busting a narrative that they set, it causes significant damage to investor confidence. It causes a significant damage to institutional trust in, Indian state institutions and things like that. I remember during, I don't know how many of you in the audience are old enough to remember this, but when there was the Vajpayee government, there used to be a gentleman called Pramod Mahajan, who used to be holding press conferences every single day and hitting sixers and fourers and whatever out of the ballpark. You could not float a nonsense story and have it find traction. Whereas here, what we find today is this government, even when it is in the national interest to crush a story then and there, is either completely incapable or sometimes scores very significant own goals in not being able to defend its position or coming out and putting out facts at all in any setting anywhere. That's a problem.
Let me pick up 3 examples of this. The first example many people would give, and we forget very quickly, was the entire controversy that was being created around the purchase of the Rafale planes. The government contradicted those. The Bharatiya Janata Party contradicted those allegations. Apart from that, there were agencies like the CAG and the Supreme Court looking into it. They take their own time to come up with their findings, but eventually they did come up with their findings, and it was made clear to the public. But the Congress party felt, for whatever reason, that Chaukidar Chor Hai would be a very great narrative to lead with. And I think the people of the country in 2019 give a resounding verdict on that particular narrative. And therefore, Abhijit, sometimes it is, and I'm showing too many of my cards, but I'm doing this only for you. Sometimes if somebody has a long rope, you let them play with it, because eventually they will hang themselves with it.
But it's not good for institutions. So,
but you
on
just
that
told,
note,
no, 1 second. You asked me a question as to why we don't bust the narrative.
It's fantastic for the BJP. Is it good for India? That's the question.
When I just gave you an answer about, okay, look, 5 minutes ago you asked me that why doesn't your party bust the narrative? And I just told you that we put national interest, and therefore even on occasions when we can do a lot of things, we pull back as a party because we know that we are running government. And running a government is different from running a party. A party looks at kitna vote badega, kitna vote ghatega. A government looks at how to take India, how to take Bharat forward. And therefore, I just gave you that answer 5 minutes ago. And you were like, not convinced. And now, just now, when I said, okay, some of the narratives, we allow them to have it their way, because eventually we know that what is going to come out of it, and they will be left red-faced. And here you're telling me, but why don't you do it? But you can't, this is the most, now you're sounding like Rajdeep.
Thank you. That's the best compliment I've gotten in a while.
Abhijit,
I look forward to boxing some of you later on. If you have something square
Abhijit,
garden here, we can have a boxing
I tell you, just look at his tweet yesterday. He had to tweet on how this was anti-democratic for Congress to boycott journalists. He's edited that tweet 5 times. I swear to God, somebody sent this to me because he's blocked me now after our last encounter. He has blocked me. Anyways, that's his mindset. But so he's edited that tweet apparently 5 times because he had to get in, okay, this is anti-democratic, but I can't be looking like taking this side. And therefore, he's thought over it 5 times over. And then he said, but hate speech should also not be allowed. And so there's a caveat in that.
So
you're sounding exactly like him.
Thank you. I do take that as a compliment. But anyway, it at least makes my voice sound more masculine than my normal squeaky self. But anyway, so quick straw poll before we go into Q&A. How many of you think the government did a good job defending Rafale and it did not create institutional damage? Put your hands up. Good job defending Rafale. Okay. No. Now, how many of you thought the government did not do a good job defending Rafale? Almost equal.
Now rephrase the question.
Yeah.
How many of you think that the government has conclusively beaten the narrative of Rafale to a pulp? There you go.
Okay. Very biased audience.
We boycott you. Godi audience. Is it Godi audience?
Godi audience. Very
Godi audience.
Shameful. Godi audience. Okay, guys. Question and answer, please. No statements, please. Just question. Because remember, he's the star of the show. And only questions. No remarks. No long commentary. Just questions. Thank you. I'll leave it up to the lovely ladies here to hand around the mics.
I can see Anand Ranganathan's hand from there.
Because he's itching to take. No mic to Anand Ranganathan. No panelists will ask questions. You get enough stage time. Let the audience ask questions.
Abhijit.
Yes.
Ask.
Organizers asking questions.
Yeah.
Shocking.
I'm asking you to ask him, how did BJP do with the farm laws and repealing it? Instead of the Rafale, this question.
Yes. Jawab do.
Look, the farm laws is a larger debate that we need to have. But why were we bringing the farm laws? We are bringing the farm laws to help the farmers out in a way we thought that was discussed upon, proposed by the Congress, ironically, and you'll have Anand quote you the manifesto of the Congress. They wanted to repeal the APMC. They wanted to do away with Essential Commodities Act. They wanted to do all of this. There was large amount of conversation. Every sector where the private space has entered, whether it's media or telecom, has benefited. And therefore, that was the approach. But for whatever reasons, even though it's at the back of a movement which is run essentially by the middlemen or the artiyas, comes and then creates a situation where that legislation, which is actually for the benefit of that community, is not going to benefit that community, then it is democracies don't work on egos. And we are happy to keep our ego aside for allowing a larger conversation to first emanate on this issue. Let me give you an example. Just now, look at what has happened. The tomato prices were rock bottom in February. They skyrocketed to 200 rupees a kilo. And today, I believe it's again 5 or 6 or 7 rupees a kilo. Look at the price. And none of these cases, the farmers are actually getting what they're supposed to get.
Yes.
It is entirely the middleman. It is the person who is getting that commission. It is costing the consumers. It is costing the farmers. So perhaps there is a need for better building of consensus. I would say not just on this issue, I think on any issue, a democracy doesn't work on ego. Democracy works on taking everybody together and if the community for which it is being brought.
But Shehzad, there was only one state protesting. I didn't see Tamil, Karnataka, Andhra, Kerala farmers protest. Did any of you see Pondicherry farmers protest out here? No. So
absolutely, and in fact, Kerala does not have an APMC. Kerala doesn't have an APMC, and therefore, I would now encourage everybody, including Rakesh Tikait and all those worthies who were very concerned about the APMC Act, should go and start phase 2 of that dharna in Kerala or in other states where there is no APMC Act. I would entirely support that agitation.
Lovely. Next question. Ratan Shardaji.
It was an interesting.
Anand, we will have our question outside.
It was an interesting friendly match. I would
Okay,
say.
as a rule, no speakers should be asking questions. Anand, I'm not giving you a question. I keep shooting your question down. Only audience.
I remove the match.
Okay.
My question is when he put his foot on the X, when he said that Sarkar hamari system tumhara, you didn't carry it forward. Why?
Because it's the truth. No, you can't argue with the truth.
No, see, it could be true for 2 years. It can't be true for 9 years.
Yes.
Ratanji, the system in this country is not just the system that is controlled by government institutions. That's not the system, actually. Actually, the system is the intellectual space where people like you are contributing. And I can also turn back and ask that you have a Abhijit doing a Pondy Lit Fest, but where are all the intellectual giants of this side? The intellectual giants of this side are busy writing books criticizing कि 370 तो हटा दिया, परंतु ये नहीं किया. Where are those intellectual giants actually making those efforts in the last 9 years? If I may ask that. Where are those intellectual giants going and telling the people that their side is getting united and here you put your caste identity first before your national or your larger identity? Those intellectual giants, the system is not bunch of universities and their vice chancellorships or bunch of other government, semi-government organizations. The system is who controls the socio-political, cultural influences. For instance, in Tamil Nadu, the entire film industry, it's not controlled by, it is in a way controlled by the government here in Tamil Nadu. But what I am trying to say is that how many Vivek Agnihotris are there in our 9 years? How many Vivek Agnihotris have come out? How many intellectual giants have come out? How many other people have come out who have said that for the moment, we are going to reserve all our larger, differences that we have, that this has not happened, but that has happened, this has not happened. We are going to keep that aside and we are going to focus first on showing and presenting a united face. Where does that happen? So the question of the system, when even that dialogue comes in the film, and I've seen that dialogue, is not just about a government institution. It is actually about the socio-cultural, intellectual institutions, which I would say is a collective failure on our part. But it is kudos to people like Abhijit and there's endeavors like Pondy Lit Fest that this man has shown the courage, or their organization has shown the courage to do this, which we sitting in Delhi have not.
Okay. Next question.
Yeah. So
Sir, in
my
the blue
question
shirt.
is, we are talking about the fourth pillar of democracy, but there is a third pillar also, which is quite involved in corruption. So the judiciary, which is, we all know that one judgment triggered the Manipur riots. So how should we approach this judiciary overreaching? And there is a unconstitutional way of the collegium system, why government is not abolishing it. And at the same time, we should do to stop this judiciary menace.
Okay,
the kind of
judicial
question-
activism, and let's just collect 2-3 because we're running out of time. We'll collect 2-3 and answer it. Next question, who wants to ask? Yes, sir.
Mr. Shehzad, how do you think government manage the narratives going against CA during the anti-CA?
Can you speak up a bit?
Hello. How do you think the government managed the narratives against CA which were running during the anti-CA riots and all those things? Do you think government did a good job in managing those things?
Okay, next, the gentleman here.
The attack on Sanatana Dharma has not been.
Can you just hold that closer, please?
It has not been. The response has been little dilute, I feel. So, what is your response to that?
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, we can't afford to not have Anand.
No speakers. No speakers. Speakers don't get questions.
No, we need to get this question because I think it's going to be a very enlightening one.
Very shocking. Very shocking. Privilege. Brahminical privilege. Extremely shocking. A Brahmin heterosexual.
I'm glad somebody has found the
Unacceptable.
courage to overrule Abhijit, finally. No, but I just wanted to say this. Of course, disagree with my brother Shehzad, elder brother, when he says that BJP has been busting narratives. Government.
Anand, can you hold it closer, please?
Yeah, the truth is certainly, most certainly, things have improved in the last 1 year, 1.5 years. You have the PIB fact check; it comes up very immediately, and things have improved. But couple of examples that you took, Shehzad. I mean, as I say, the Congress is a master at deception, and the BJP is a disaster at perception. You know, the first one that started was 2014, Christians under attack. It took 3 months for the government to bring out the data that there were more such attacks that were normal burglary and arson during the UPA than they were when people were shouting Christians under attack. It did absolutely nothing for 3 months. And when you say, when there was a show of hands, I'm disappointed in this wonderful audience, but still I implore you to buy my book. But when you say half and half people, government did a good job on Rafale, government did a pathetic job of Rafale. The guy sitting there who's not allowing me to ask a question was the one who actually busted the narrative. Abhijit, in case you are wondering, Abhijit, whom I'm pointing the finger to. So it is because of Abhijit that and his 12 articles in Economic Times and other that the real thing was busted, and I have it on record that the Supreme Court final judgment came. I won't name the lawyer, but the judges actually read what this guy wrote. I mean, it's a start that. So at least somebody is reading what Abhijit wrote. Now, but the third final point I like to make, and Shehzad, here I really want you to come in, is that when you talk about busting narratives, Nupur to aapki thi na, hamari thi. Why didn't BJP, someone officially say, why doesn't somebody fact check the 2 verses that Nupur quoted from? That would have completely busted a narrative and saved the life of Nupur.
Yes.
Now I'll answer all these questions, but no counter for Anand. No, you've asked for 3 minutes.
Yeah, this was the last set of questions. That's it. We're running out.
First of all, notice one fact. All of these people who ask these questions are reasonably tough, difficult questions to answer. And this is happening in a lit fest, which is all amongst us. So this is the kind of openness that we run with. On the other hand, you have a bunch of parties who speak about democracy. And on the day of democracy, it was International Democracy Day, I believe yesterday, they have boycotted journalists for asking questions. I can see one of them, Shivaru, right there. And badge of honor. So this is the fundamental difference between us and them. Now, secondly, Anand, you can very well have a feeling or a position that the government's not done a good job in fact checking. Our job is not to do fact checks just for the sake of controlling the narrative. Like I said, there are some things that the government can't disclose. Let me tell you specifically. The question that Rahul Gandhi was asking was that, tell me the cost of that plane. And Shiv will tell you that any kind of foolish person telling you the specifics of that would play into the hands of China and into the hands of Pakistan as to what is there on that aircraft and what are the details. So we will give it. Now, Abhijit is a very well-researched, articulate, and foremost defense expert of this country. He has the freedom to say and make informed, allegedly, make those informed, points in an article. But it is not for the government to come out and clarify on everything and fall into a trap and say, no, but this plane costs this much because it has A, B, C, D, E, F on it, and therefore your comparison with those planes are not right, etc., etc. There are some things that we won't do at the cost of national security, and I am proud that my government puts national security before political security. I am proud of it. And I am ready to accept Anand Ranganathan's 1,000 criticism, but Rashtra Dharma is sabse bada for me. It is Parmo Dharma for me. And therefore, one time my party suffers, it's fine for me. By the way, I was not in the party back then. I joined the party in 2021. But nonetheless, even if you have that view of my colleagues did what was right, which was constitutionally and important from national security point of view. We did the exact right thing and we'll continue to do that. As far as the other episode is concerned, we are a political party, and a political party's job is not to get into theology in the speak about, yes, if somebody attacks a religion, we must stand up for it. We must vociferously say that this is hate speech, which we did, which we are doing even now when they are attacking Hindus and Sanatan Dharma. But I think there are many other scholars who have called out what exactly happened. And I think that that discussion is best left to those who are theologians, who understand the faith and who are able to communicate it and articulate it in a better way. It is not for us to articulate what is right or what is not right in a scripture. But yes, when somebody makes a hate speech out of it, of course we will stand up and we will defend that this is hate speech, and we will attack the person who has made that hate speech, like we are doing for A. Raja or for the people in the Congress party who are attacking Hindu religion.
Thank you so much. I sure had fun, and we're done. Thank you. That was it.